Temperature and hypoxia. Excessive heat can affect our bodies in different ways, both externally and internally. This excessive heat can cause serious problems to our bodies, whether we are exercising or not. However, we have a mechanism to keep homeostasis, or a normal temperature, in our bodies, and this mechanism is the hypothalamus. Located in the brain, the hypothalamus responds to changing core temperature of different bodily movements. However, these responses are different depending on whether the person is overheating or underheating, as this guy is. Responses to overheating. If our core temp begins to rise, there are ways in which the body tries to remove heat and limit heat intake or production. Vasodilation is a response from the hypothalamus to remove heat by allowing blood to flow to the surface of the skin where it can diffuse out of the body. Hairs can also lie flat on the skin's surface so that heat can be quickly diffused without being trapped in the hairs. Sweating also releases heat through fluid from the sweat glands, but this fluid can also help decrease temperature more, as evaporation of the hot sweat on the body surface can cool the skin down. This is known as evaporation, which is one of the four methods of heat loss. Conduction, radiation, and respiration are the other three. Conduction is an external way of heat loss where heat is transferred due to direct contact with a cooler object. Due to the lack of energy in the cooler object, heat is transferred more reluctantly to that object, and the heat is lost from the body. Radiation, on the other hand, is a transfer without contact due to electromagnetic waves absorbing the energy and carrying it. This is common when there is more bare skin visible and susceptible to the waves, and this is why you suffer a 60% loss in heat when you're nude. Respiration can also cause heat loss due to the internal air, which warms near the core, is lost when expired, and then the cold air from the outside is inhaled, therefore cooling the core. Effects of overheating. The main effect of overheating is dehydration, which is where the body is very low on bodily fluid, and this can affect the efficiency of vital organs in the brain. You can easily prevent dehydration by consuming the water you've lost. However, there are effects such as heat stress, where evaporation isn't happening as fast enough and sweat builds up on the skin, and this can cause discomfort. This causes discomfort psychologically. This is the most common when exercising due to the increased temperature equating to more sweat that is not able to be evaporated. There are many ways to prevent heat stress, such as exercising in cooler parts of the day, wearing lighter clothing, and it's because darker clothing can attract the sun and therefore the heat. Effect of overheating on performance. Dehydration can cause bigger problems to your body during performance. The table shows the effect dehydration can have as a percentage of body weight that is lost through sweat. 2 to 4% of body weight loss starts inhibiting performance and muscular capacity to work. 5 to 10% of body weight lost through sweat can start causing serious problems such as heat exhaustion, hallucinations, circulatory collapse, and even heat stroke. This can be common in competitive sports due to how athletes will push themselves to win. This has caused problems in competitions played in hot countries, such as how the 2014 Football World Cup was affected in Rio, Brazil. Referees gave 3-minute breaks in between each half so that players could replace the water they had lost in the 30-degree heat. Comfortable temperatures may see an athlete sweat 2 litres of fluid a day. However, this escalates in temperature in around the 30s, and up to around 10 litres can be lost. So not only will overheating cause our body's problems, but a decrease in your core temperature can result in just as many hazardous problems. Our hypothalamus may choose opposite responses and actions to take upon the decrease in temperature compared to the increase in temperature in order to retain the homeostasis. Responses to being abnormally cold. If our body was overheating, the hypothalamus would respond by vasodilating blood vessels to rid of internal heat quicker. However, if we were too cold, the hypothalamus would receive information from the skin and blood receptor cells saying that the external areas of the body are becoming too cold. The hypothalamus would then respond by vasoconstricting the vessels away from the skin so that the heat energy there cannot be evaporated. Hairs also will rise to trap a layer of air above the skin to insulate the body and keep in as much heat as possible. This shows how the four methods of heat loss still comply with being abnormally cold. The trapped air is warmed by conduction to help reduce the heat loss. Evaporation is reduced due to the sweat glands stopping secretion so that less sweat can evaporate, which would ultimately cool the skin by taking away the heat energy. Another response which is very common when there is a decrease in temp is shivering. Shivering is an involuntary reflex that vibrates and shakes the muscles into small movements which can create heat due to the little contractions, and this may be why you shiver when getting out of a cold swimming pool. The shivering helps warm the body with the use of conduction and convection because of the movement it creates with the fluids around the muscle and the muscles themselves, and this amasses the kinetic energy. Effects of being too cold, however, the main one is hypothermia, which is a major drop in core temperature due to the body losing heat quicker than it can be replaced. Hypothermia can come in three types: acute immersion, or a rapid drop in temperature; exhaustion, when the body is too fatigued to create any more heat and therefore succumbs to it getting colder. Chronic hypothermia is a slow decrease in temperature. As the table shows, oh, I didn't do it. As the table shows, the core temp may drop just by a few degrees, but this can cause major problems. A drop of just 4 degrees Celsius shuts down the metabolic process completely and causes the vital organs to fail. There are intrinsic and extrinsic ways to stop the hypothermia from progressing or becoming serious, such as intrinsically shivering as a resultant response from the hypothalamus. Externally, we can voluntarily put on extra clothing in order to create a bigger insulation around the skin. Consumption of warm fluids such as hot chocolate or tea are common to use when trekking through freezing terrain, as the hot temperature from the fluids can reach into the vital organs and warm them up from inside. Physical activity is a good way of producing heat to keep warm, which is why it is important to keep moving in cold water. Otherwise, the direct conduction with the water will quickly cause hypothermia. The effect of the decreased temperature on performance. Although physical activity can help increase the temperature, if the body becomes inactive for a period, as may happen during rugby or football where there may be stoppages, then the body becomes susceptible to some physiological changes. A lower breathing rate occurs, and this can be dangerous due to it inhibiting the amount of oxygen that is inhaled. This will then affect the amount of oxygen that is delivered to the muscles, ultimately fatiguing the muscles so less heat can be produced. This goes as well for a lowered heart rate and blood pressure, which also affects oxygen delivery to the muscles. A muscular problem is also how the cold may result in the muscles becoming less supple and more at risk to snapping and tearing because they freeze up. An American football game, a sport well known for its stoppages, and where there's 11 players are playing and 11 are waiting off the field. A game between the Chicago Bears and Green Bay Packers was played at a temperature of 2 degrees, but had a wind chill of -18. Due to these stoppages, players would feel the effects of the cold, but they use extrinsic factors such as wearing wetsuits and thermals under their kits and wearing long sleeve jerseys. There they are in the snow. So what is altitude? As for hypoxia, altitude is the effect of moving high up towards the Earth's atmosphere, and with this, the partial pressure of oxygen is drastically reduced, as this table shows. Less than 500 meters, which is around sea level, where you have normoxia or normal conditions. Normal conditions are such as full saturation of hemoglobin. Then you get to the moderate altitude, 1,500 to 3,000 meters up. You reduce barometric pressure, reduce partial pressure in the oxygen, air temp and humidity, and you can get acute mountain sickness. 3,000 meters is a high altitude. You can get pulmonary edema. Continuous climbs or elevation may cause permanent brain damage because of the lack of oxygen that gets up into your brain. Very high altitudes can get a high cerebral edema, but when you get into the death zone above 8,000 meters, which is around where Mount Everest is, there's a 9% blood saturation, which is crazy low. As I have a table later on that will show this, but you get a loss of the vital functions, I guess, eyesight, motor skills and stuff like that. You get stressed out, and this could leads you getting stuck on the mountain, panicking, a lack of O2 leading to physical weakness and fatigue, and then chronic mountain disease as well. So it's not great, really. Responses to the high altitude, however. If we find ourselves at a high altitude, we may experience some responses. Hyperventilation is a common response, where the body increases breathing rate in order to gain additional oxygen, oxygen which is scarce at the altitude. From that table, see how the blood is saturated at different heights. This table here, see how the blood is saturated at different heights. You may also experience tachycardia, where the heart rate is increasing in a desperate attempt to get blood to the muscles quicker due to how there is less oxygen. However, this is inefficient because of how the ventricles cannot properly fill before leaving the heart, meaning that ultimately less oxygen is being delivered to working muscles as hemoglobin cannot saturate fully. OBLA, or onset blood lactate accumulation, is also quicker due to the lack of oxygen, and this can really affect athletes who are not acclimatized to the altitude, as will be explained after the next slide. This slide shows the effects of high altitude. It can affect the body's respiratory and cardiovascular systems due to the low partial pressure of oxygen. The alveoli do not have much oxygen to saturate the hemoglobin with. This then means that the muscles gain little amounts of oxygen due to the hemoglobin not being able to dissociate much oxygen. This means that there is a shallow gradient between the hemoglobin and muscles, making dissociation even more difficult. Because of the shallow gradient due to the hemoglobin returning to the lungs with little oxygen. Oxygen that the alveoli doesn't have means that dissociation is less likely, again due to the partial pressure in both compartments are both low. Cardiovascularly, due to the partial pressure with high altitude, the max oxygen uptake is lowered, and you can also become nauseous and sick when up high, as the past table showed. Up high you can get very ill with acute mountain sickness and stuff like that. On this graph here, you can see the partial pressure difference. At sea level, you have 159 mmHg, and then up with altitude, it falls right down to 96. So you can see the difference in between the saturation of oxygen levels in the air. Adaptations to the high altitude. There's a picture there of a sleeping tent. Despite the performance struggling in high altitudes, there are ways in which they can adapt to the altitude. Athletes can buy sleeping tents which contain low partial pressure of oxygen, so they can acclimatise when they sleep. This is because their bodies adapt to the low saturation levels of the hemoglobin up high, so that when they return to sea level, their hemoglobin are flooded and the muscles receive more oxygen to help increase performance levels. Athletes can also do this by training in altitude chambers, where there's a spin bike or a treadmill placed in a chamber with low altitude to help them acclimatise to the low partial pressure during the exercise itself.